typical Halloween night in North America. Excited kids ring doorbells and ring out the familiar, "It's great fun." But it has a dark side. And this is it. You kids, go watch Cocomelon. This is for grown-ups. You're going to be too scared. While wholesome and fun on the surface, Halloween can be seen as one of the most controversial celebrations in America. And it seems it's also a great excuse to f things up. This is the dark side of Halloween. I'm Bob from Get Details. As far as we can tell, the very first mention of trick-or-treating in print was in 1927 in a newspaper in Alberta, Canada. Some people say the practice goes back 2,000 years ago to ancient Celtic traditions, where the poor would go door to door offering prayers to the dead in exchange for food. It was believed during the Samhain festival, the world of the dead would be visible to humans, and the gods would take advantage of the fact by playing tricks on their mortal worshippers. To protect themselves, mortals would wear masks and other disguises to keep the ghosts from being able to recognize them. As immigrants from Ireland and Scotland came to America, they brought their ancient traditions with them. But along the way, some things were lost in translation. That's how we find ourselves in Alberta, where a group of young thugs were doing pranks as a way of extorting money or food or anything else they could get. Now remember, this is before electricity, so it is really dark, no moon, and you can hear voices whispering. This is the season for witchery, the night the spirits of the dead rise from their graves and hover behind hedges. If you were caught alone outside at night, you would be lucky if all you needed was a change of underwear. They're really just a nuisance, doing things like rattling windows to scare the poor people inside, or tying doors shut, coating seats with molasses, and even some homemade pipe bombs were tossed into outhouses. Blew the out of them. This ritual vandalism was getting out of hand. The tricks were getting worse, and they would just help themselves to the treats. And it's not a very large leap from vandalism to physical brutality. This kind of thuggery was becoming more widespread, so some groups stepped in and made Halloween a more family-friendly event. You can thank commercialism for that. Candy makers and costume companies, the growth of mass media like TV and radio,
He did the Monster Man.
and the fact that we were just tired of their shit. And it worked. Halloween became a nice family-friendly, safe event that even churches could get behind, and no more pranks were ever committed. If only. We're here to talk about the dark side of Halloween. Now that we know why little kids dress up like pirates and fairies and beg their neighbors for candy. But just a few streets over, a car unlucky enough to be parked on the street suddenly becomes an omelet. Yard statues and anything else that's not tied down gets stolen or rearranged. It's all good fun. Until it's not. This is the dark side of Halloween. Hooliganism, vandalism, brutality, violence, lawlessness, and mischief. Happy Halloween. Now give us a treat. It was a horrible scene. A man had been run over by his lawnmower and was under the heavy machine, seemingly chopped to bits in the front yard. Only his arms and legs could be seen, and they were covered with blood. The quiet North Carolina neighborhood had never seen anything like this before. Someone called 911. The cops arrived, and they were horrified by the carnage. They relied on their training and were ready to perform CPR when it became obvious. This was a very well done Halloween prank. Halloween seems to bring out the meanness in some people, like the YouTuber who would video his cruelty for views. His sweet, unassuming wife arrives home and sees her son dressed as Spider-Man playing with Dad upstairs. As she goes upstairs, her husband says, "Please get a glass of water," which gives him just long enough to set up the kill. He hides his son and replaces him with a life-size dummy, dressed in the same costume. As his wife reaches the top step, he yells, "Ready to fly?" And he throws the dummy over the banister. His wife nearly fainted, as her child appeared to be gravely injured. But as she pulled off the mask, she realized she'd been tricked.
I hate you.
A real class act. But class really has nothing to do with it. Halloween is an excuse for some people who really don't need one. Every 35 minutes, someone's life is snuffed out by violence in America. But on Halloween, that number goes up dramatically. Insurance geeks say crime goes up close to 20% on Halloween. Because evil lurks among us in the darkness, and sometimes in broad daylight. That was the MO of the LA Toolbox Killers. They would ride around in their beat-up old GM cargo van they called the Murder Mac, picking up females off the street, then torturing them with the tools in the toolbox until they were dead, and then drop them off a cliff. Some pretty gruesome things could be done with a wrench or whatever that thing is. The last victim, a 16-year-old girl, was picked up after leaving a Halloween party. They did their perverted work with a sledgehammer and pliers, and even took pictures and recorded her screams until they killed her. They dumped her body in someone's yard. Both of the sickos are still rotting away today in prison. I hope there's someone's... Michael March may have been dressed as a clown, but the judge didn't think his antics were very funny. That Halloween night when he chased a pregnant woman with an axe, the victim of his prank threw a brick at the killer clown before fleeing for her life. That same night, he thumped his axe on the ground, frightening another couple. They called the cops. He tried to explain it was all just a joke. He never intended to hurt anyone. His lawyer argued, he shouldn't have to go to jail. He's a good boy. The judge disagreed and sentenced him to 6 months behind bars. It was Halloween night in Michigan. A 16-year-old named Devin came home to play video games after a Halloween party. But it was strangely quiet in the house when he stepped inside. Normally, there would be some kind of noise, like TV, or music from his brother's room. But it was quiet. Quiet as a tomb, which was appropriate. He made his way upstairs to see where everyone was. He would find his worst nightmare. His father, mother, and older brother were all bloody and dead. They'd been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, and then the mother shot them. His stepbrother William had killed them. He avoided the death penalty, but committed suicide in prison 2 years later. And finally, tragedy. In Kentucky, a 16-year-old honors student loved Halloween. He always had. And he loved pulling innocent pranks. But innocent tricks can lose their appeal after a while. So Jordan Moreland stepped it up a notch. He had planned to pretend to hang himself from a tree in his family's front yard. But something went heartbreakingly wrong. Somehow, the rope got stuck around his neck, asphyxiating him. His sister found him, thinking he was pranking her, and found the most unfunny prank ever. He died at the hospital. His mother wants others to know, so they won't cause such senseless and tragic heartbreak for someone else. So there you go, a look at the dark side of Halloween. And you know, there's so much more. But if I told you, you couldn't sleep at night. Hey, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our other completely shocking videos and get details.